today that we would do a lesson that is one of those fun lessons with our young people in mind. I thought we would talk about man's best friend, the dog. That's right, Lacey. We're going to talk about dogs today. And I want to remind us that the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1 says that we can learn a lot about God by his creation. But these little things, we could go so many different directions with the dog. And yes, if Sally were with us this morning, I even put a picture that I thought could be her dog up there this morning. So dogs are amazing creatures. They come in so many different shapes and sizes and different talents and abilities that they amaze me that they are all still dogs. But I want us to look today and see how just one little aspect of these fabulous created creatures defy the evolution theory, proving intelligent design. Intelligent design, I might add, by our God and Creator. Now, at our house right now, we have puppies, and who doesn't like puppies? They're cute, they're cuddly. They make these little things, and Kate's got bells on them right now, so when they're hopping across the floor, there's these little bells dingling. Now, most people love dogs. There are a few people who are afraid of dogs. I've got a very good friend who worshiped with us here for a number of years that actually is afraid of dogs. But most people really have a true love and affection for dogs. And I think part of it is, and one thing that amuses me, is to watch people with their dogs. Because I really believe that people's pets represent who they are. You know, and I can look at people sometimes and see the similarities. And then sometimes you don't look at them, but there's a personality. You know, we had a neighbor that she had little miniature Doberman pinchers. And I know why. You know, and there's other people that have dogs that really fit their person. All right, and I know that some of you are cat people too, Haley. But anyway, but today we're going to look at this canine family and all of the different varieties that represent the canine family. So back in Genesis, if we go back to Genesis chapter 5. Let me go back here for a moment. Man became so wicked that God said, I'm going to destroy my creation. Have you ever made something? Chances are, if you have made something, when you're done with it, you're very proud of that. I know some of my kids are really good artists. My mother-in-law is a great artist. Celia draws some beautiful pictures and has beautiful artwork. And I believe that any artist or person who builds or creates something takes a certain amount of pride or satisfaction in what they have created. And God is no exception to that. Genesis chapter 1, as he created every day, he would look at his creation, he would say, and it was good. God makes that statement about his creation, that it was good. God saw what he had created, and it was very good. And so in Genesis chapter 5, as we look at this, God's creation is no longer good. It is no longer very good. God's creation, in fact, has become corrupted through sin in the world. Genesis chapter 5, verse 5, let's drop down. I think it's actually Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Genesis 6, verse 5, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted. The Hebrew word that is used there, I think, would indicate not just regret, but also sadness, disappointment, that his creation has become so corrupt and so separated and so wicked from him that it leads God to this conclusion. It says, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, that it grieved him in his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created, from the face of the land, and the animals and creeping things and birds of heaven, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And so we know the story. We teach our children about the ark that God had Noah build in order to save his family and to save a few of the animals. So how many Canaanites were in the ark? Because we have some animals, there were 7 pairs of the clean animals, and a male and a female, the unclean animals. Peter's back here holding his fingers up like this. That's right, Peter. There's two dogs. A boy dog and a girl dog. Wait a minute. Think back to that first picture we had on the slide. Think back to the picture we had on the slide. Why 2? Well, God classified them as an unclean animal. And I understand why God classified them as an unclean animal. That doesn't mean they're less desirable, less pretty, or friendly to us. But they were simply an unclean animal in God's classification. Think back to the picture at the beginning of this slideshow of all those different breeds of dogs. The question might arise, how did all of those dogs come from 2 dogs? And it is a question that really scientists don't fully understand or comprehend. There are certain things that God has in his creation that we can only grasp at. God asked Job in Job 38, verse 1, a basic question. Now I want you to see this question. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man, I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Can't you hear? God is irritated. If he's not angry, he's a parent using self-control not to yell at his child. So I want you to think about that. As a parent, I'm sure that your children have done something that have just totally irritated you, and you have to use complete, total self-control to keep from snapping their heads off. God's like that with Job. But here's his question. And his frustration stems from not Job's doubt, but Job's depression. And really, quite frankly, the pity party that Job has decided to host for himself, including his friends who are well-meaning but rather stupid. God says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined the measurements? Surely you know. See, Job had presumed to question God's ability, God's plan, or who stretched the line upon it, on what were its bases sunk, or who laid its stones, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The whole chapter 38 is a question. It's God questioning Job for questioning him. So, God basically said, tell me if you understand. At the end, at the final amount of this, Job comes to a conclusion that he doesn't understand. Job realizes that God knows far more than he does. I want you to fast forward in Job to chapter 42. Then Job answered and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you make it known to me. I had heard you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Okay, bottom line. We don't fully understand genetics, but we have an idea of the fascination that God has with genetics. I studied a little bit of genetics in my younger years, and I have to say I know very little about them. I don't understand how they work, but they are fascinating. And in Romans chapter 1, verse 21, if you'll go back there with me, I want to think about all these fascinating creatures we call dogs and the great diversity that is in them. And this has led some so-called scientists to come to the conclusion that dogs are evolution in action. I don't want to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but I want us to see what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 1. And just in verse 21, I want to draw your attention to. Paul says, for though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. I think this sums up a great deal of our so-called scientific ideas and theories today, including the evolution theory. I have a very, very old friend who was a professor at Ohio University in Athens when I was college age. And I learned a lot. She and her husband are biologists, and her husband's passed now, but he was the head of the biology department at Ohio University. And it amazes me some of the things that my friend will post on Facebook. A very intelligent person who is educated to the highest ability that she has, and yet sometimes misunderstanding some of the simple facts of life. For example, it wasn't very long ago that a mutual friend of ours posted on Facebook that God didn't create 20-some genders. God created A chromosome and Y chromosome, I think it is, whatever it is, the chromosomes that create male and female. And Rose came up with a very long, lengthy answer that as to why there are so many different gender identities available. And I thought to myself about this passage in Romans. Back to man's best friend. So if God only brought 2 dogs on the ark, where did we get all of these amazing different varieties and colors and shapes and sizes of dogs? We have dogs. Mike has dogs that hunt. He has coon dogs. A sport I've never understood, but I'll leave that to Mike and my brothers. We have farm dogs that some herd cattle, some herd sheep. Believe it or not, our worthless little corgi puppies at home have built-in instincts of herding. They were sheepdogs. And some of them still, and some of our dogs think that cattle are sheep, and they drive me absolutely crazy because they're untrained. But they have this gene inside their bodies that says, I've got to herd something. There's an animal. I'm going to chase it. And they just can't help themselves. They run out, they get in front of the cows, and they yip, 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 yip. And you're like, I'm out. We have guard dogs. We have pet dogs. Sally has this little thing over there, or a couple little things over there, that yip, 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 yip. They crawl up in her lap and she cuddles with them. As far as I can tell, that's the only purpose they have in life. And it's great. and it's wonderful. We have rescue dogs that are trained to seek out people and find them in the most dangerous conditions. We even have, one of the things I didn't even know was a thing. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Wiener Dog Derby down here. And down on the park, I never heard of such a thing, a Wiener Dog Derby. Do you know the thing that I didn't know about Wiener dogs? They were bred as hunting dogs. Dachshund Hound. They were bred for hunting badgers. But why? Because those long little dogs can get down a badger hole. And they can go out and scare the badger out. Why? Who would have thought? Now we just know them as pets. But they were German badger dogs. So where did they all come from? And how do we get such a diverse amount in the canine family? We have dogs trained to predict tornadoes. Did you know that? There are dogs that the government uses in high tornado regions who get this sense in the air and they feel the atmosphere as tornadoes form. We have dogs who are trained to find drugs. Here's another one I didn't realize. We have dogs that are trained to find skin cancers. They can smell it. There's a different smell to melanoma. And they can identify a mole as being cancerous before the doctors even run the test. Amazing. We have dogs that are trained to help the blind and the deaf. We have dogs that are trained to predict seizures. Someone who is prone to seizures can get a medical dog that will sense when the person's body, up to 2 minutes before the person themselves realizes that they're about to have a seizure, the dog can predict 2 full minutes before that seizure occurs. Wow, that's amazing. No wonder we call them man's best friend. On the surface, one might agree with some scientists who say that dogs are evolution in action. But is it really? Here's what I learned about genetics. Anytime you take a species, my specialty was chickens. I know, weird hobby. My specialty was chickens, though. And what I learned about breed development is that you are never adding to the DNA or genetic code of a chicken. All you're doing is pulling something out. So, here's the thing with dogs. There's nothing new in dogs. Okay, there's nothing new. What we have done is we have separated the different characteristics in various dog varieties. We've separated the DNA. And what we've done is what is termed genetic manipulation. Okay, wrap your mind, not genetic alteration, but we have manipulated the genes to find what creates a dog that fits in a teacup. Now, if there was ever a worthless dog, I'm sure that has to be it. Cute little thing, though. Cute little thing. Or we manipulate the genes to create a Great Dane, something that half of my children could ride. Now, if Noah brought 2 dogs or 2 wolves, or let's be more specific, 2 canines on the ark, deep down inside of those 2 dogs, or those 2 canines, is all of the genetics that make up dogs. Because as far as science has been able to prove, while we have what we call gene mutation, we never add anything to the genetic code. Without a laboratory and scientific alteration that we know of as genetically engineering, through natural selection, no one has ever added a gene to anything. Now, we can do it now through laboratory use and genetically engineering projects. We can take a gene out of a fish and we can put it in sweet corn. Not joking. We do that. We take a gene out of a fish and we put it in sweet corn, and suddenly we have sweet corn that doesn't get smut. Most people in here probably don't even remember smut. When I was a kid, we used to get those little mushroom funguses growing on our sweet corn plants. It's called smut. Well, through genetic manipulation, we've managed to breed a lot of those genes out of sweet corn. But the commercial sweet corn industry has taken a fish gene, shoved it into a sweet corn plant, and we have smut-resistant sweet corn. Okay? Now, we haven't done that with dogs that I know of. None of my research has shown that. So far, over a few thousand years, people have worked with dogs. And what we do is we breed dogs that we think are pretty or attractive or have the best nose. I'm sure that's important in Mike's business, to have the best nose. When you're hunting coon, you want something that's going to be able to smell. But over a few thousand years since Noah, dogs have been selected for certain traits and characteristics that people think are desirable. And eventually you get a poodle. It's a dog that has nothing else left. And we call it a poodle. Hopefully there are no poodle lovers in here. I had a great aunt that had poodles, by the way. And I thought they were interesting looking dogs, but kind of freak showish. But, so eventually, but you can never take two poodles and breed them back to a wolf. You can't do it. Because what you've done in the selection process is you've selected out, you've opted out, you say, well, I want dogs with longer hair, so you get long-haired dogs. You only save puppies with long hairs. The short-hair gene is lost. You say, well, I only want dogs with curly hair, long curly hair. And so you select all the puppies out with the curly hair. The straight-hair gene is lost. So on and so forth until you get a poodle. The poodle didn't evolve. It was selective breeding. You see, in order for the evolution theory to work, for a dog to evolve, okay, evolution says that we all came from these little microscopic creatures, right? Proteins, I believe, is where they say we originated from in the evolution theory. But in order for that to occur, what we have to do is add genetic material into this protein. It does not happen naturally. It cannot happen naturally. It won't happen. Dogs demonstrate that. Such a wide diversity, and yet all we've done is remove certain things. All man has accomplished with the poodle is to remove information from the DNA until there was nothing left except that poodle. A freak of nature. Another example. Isn't this the cutest, ugliest puppy you've ever seen? I mean, if you could have a cute, ugly contest, he'd win. The Shire Perry, or however you pronounce it, the dog with the wrinkles. They didn't add something to his genetics to get wrinkly skin. What they took was a They took something out. He started out when they began to breed these as really, really big dogs. And as they shrunk the breed, they removed all the DNA for a big, muscular, big boned dog. But through natural selection and breeding programs, someone forgot to take the dogs that didn't have, that skin actually fit, you know? So it's like somebody who gets a coat that's 3 times too big. See, these guys prove that God created DNA. And God created diversity in DNA. And all we can do is manipulate God's DNA and pull out the things that we're not looking for. So they take a big muscular dog with a skin that fits him like a normal dog would, and they shrink him. But they forget to shrink the skin. And so you have a Cher Perry, or however the name is pronounced, a wrinkly dog. A dog that looks to me like he got left in the washing too long. He soaked in the bathtub until he was nothing but wrinkles. Again, nothing was added to his DNA. The same basic DNA runs through all dogs. It's just some dogs are missing certain aspects of their DNA. And this fella is missing his size. We call it DNA manipulation, but it's still a dog. I want you to notice something back in Genesis. We can take all kinds of dogs and we can slowly, over a long period of time, selectively breed them to be different shapes, sizes, and colors. But they're still dogs. They are still part of the canine family where they belong. One thing, though, that happens over a period of time with genetic manipulation, we don't see it much in dogs, but we see it in things like horses, donkeys, zebras. Eventually, there gets to be a separation, a gap in the DNA. You can breed a horse and a donkey, and what you get is a mule. Those are sterile because there's a gap in the DNA that make the two almost incompatible. We have the same thing in human beings. Okay? I have a very good friend who has, his family has a genetic disorder. Okay? And eventually it's gotten to be where there is so much of a gap in the genetic code that my friend can't have children. His sister who has the same genetic disorder can't have children. There's a genetic gap there. Okay? It's not that they're not humans anymore. It's just that there's a genetic gap. And so the species dies at that point. Eventually we can do that with dogs. We can get them to the point to where, like for example, Kate has a friend, I don't know what they're thinking. They have a hairless dog. You ever say, I'm telling you, it is an ugly mutt. There is nothing uglier than a hairless dog. I thought this poor wrinkled guy was some or a poodle, but no. This Mexican hairless dog they've got, whoo! Okay, I'm pretty sure that's the end of the DNA manipulation. I don't think you can go any farther. All right? But eventually you do reach the end of that DNA manipulation. Brings us back to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 24. This is the this is the 6th day when God made the animals. He says that God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures according to their kinds. I want you to notice that. according to their kinds. Okay? A dog will always be a canine. Now, not all canines are dogs. We have wolves and we have coyotes and we have other members of the canine family. But they will all always be canines. They will always be in that family. Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. This is one of the reasons that I kind of pulled back from the study of genetics. I think we've overstepped our bounds as human beings. A personal opinion. I'll let someone else make their decisions. But personal opinion. When God says this is going to come after his kind, and this is going to come after their kind, and this is going to come after their kind. When we take a gene out of a fish and put it in a sweet corn, I think we've overstepped our bounds because we don't have, that would be what, fish, maybe? It's not sweet corn, it's not a fish. It's a quiche. I think we've taken over too far in dabbling sometimes in genetics, although they're fascinating. But all dogs are still dogs. They're still part of the canine family. In closing this morning, we look at dogs. We look at all of God's creation. And when you look at dogs, I want you to see the diversity that God has created. I want you to see the fascinating genetics that God has created in dogs, realizing that man has selected out certain of those genetics to make them more prominently displayed in certain breeds. And we should look at that, and it should inspire our faith. Just like the Hebrew writer writes to the Hebrew Christians in Hebrews chapter 11. I want to go there for a minute. The Hebrew writer in Hebrews chapter 11 and in verse 3 says this. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. In other words, looking at dogs, we should be inspired to think of a God who could come up with all of those different genes that really, up until this last century, we knew nothing about genetics. We knew almost nothing about DNA. And the further we delve into it, the more it should inspire us to be able to realize that there is a creator who understands so much more than we ever will. Now, the boys and I have been working on an old tractor. And we've got one pretty close to that. The Massey Harris Model 50. And to make a long story short, it died in the pasture field early spring. We finally pulled it up the barn, cleaned it up, and got it running again. But we can clearly see that someone designed it and someone built it. There's no chance of that happening by an accident. And there's no more chance of a dog, whatever your favorite breed, whatever goofy looking little critter you call your best friend, there is no more chance of a dog coming into being by accident than there is for that tractor to be in my tractor shed by accident. I couldn't take a pile of minerals, throw them up into the air, and have them come down as not even a spark plug, let alone a tractor. Someone designed it, someone built it. We see that, we don't even question it when it comes to a tractor. There's no doubt in our minds. And when we look at God's creation, we should be able to see that there was a designer and a builder. And it should inspire us as Christians to get to know the designer better. It should inspire us to learn more about God and His creativity. Because God's creation has been inspiring the human race for centuries. Did you know dragonfly wings inspired the man to build the helicopter? Without God's creation, we wouldn't have helicopters. Do you know the Wright brothers looked to the birds to build the first airplane? Without God's creation, we wouldn't fly. So when we look at dogs, let's be reminded of a God that had so much creativity and so much excitement in his imagination that He created all those different varieties of dogs. I want to go back. One last passage I want to go to today is in Psalms, chapter 39. Psalm 139 and in verse 14. Psalm 139, verse 14. The psalmist says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. The psalmist says that you and I are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are not an accident, just a smashing together of genetic material. But we are a specific design created by God, just like Celia creates her paintings. And we are created to bring glory and honor to Him. We are created to serve God, to love God, to learn more about God. We're created to be His children. And if you're here today, you're not a child of God, I would ask you to ask yourself this question. Why not? Why are you not a child of God? What's holding you back? I think the evidence is pretty clear that there is a God, there is a Creator. So why not serve Him? Why not bring praise and glory and honor to someone we owe everything to? If you're here today and you're not a child of God, let's dare to do that. As together we stand and sing the invitation song. 480.